Pistons make a trade. I got a million thoughts about it. The Travis Walton statement, I've got a lot of thoughts about that. I want to start out, though, with the Blake Griffin stuff. We'll get to Travis Walton at 3 o'clock. Let me at least paint both sides of it before I tell you what side I'm choosing. I hate when I see the headlines and they read, well, the Pistons had to do it. Or if you have a chance to get a top 15, a top 20, a top 30 player, you got to do it. I hate when I read stuff like that because it has no merit. It's nonsense. Those are narratives that aren't proven or true. The side of, hey, it wasn't working the way they were doing it, had an opportunity to get a talented guy, Avery was probably going to leave. I get those things. And certainly, Blake Griffin is a good basketball player. I think it's laughable for Stan Van Gundy to suggest he's an all-NBA caliber guy. He hasn't made an all-star team in 3 seasons. More on that in a moment. But when people begin to defend trades with things like ticket sales, excitement, make playoffs, you lose me. I'm not that type of person. First of all, it's not my problem there's no one in the arena. You want people in the arena, go win games. I don't know that Blake Griffin is going to help you win a ton of games. I'll explain. But there are two sides. And the one side is you're a fan. You haven't been able to root for anything with your basketball team in a decade. You haven't had a player you cared about in a decade. And on today, Tuesday, January 30th, you're just happy they did something. All right? I understand that. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. I'm not going to yell about it. I view every deal the same way. There's no emotion here. I don't care when the legend in the city is dealt. I don't care how a trade goes down. Okay, we can get into arguments about loyalty and not and all that. It's not my bag. This is a business. And right here, I honestly think what the Pistons have done borders on irresponsible. And what I mean by that is this. According to people in the league, there was very little interest about Blake Griffin. And his contract is the big reason why. Many of you will say, well, we can't get free agents here. We got to overpay. Noted. The problem is you already have a contract on this team that nobody wants to touch, and that's Andre Drummond. Now you're requiring a 28-year-old whose athleticism is declining as his salary is increasing. Now, Sully, you were kind enough to give this to me, and I do appreciate it. $30 million this year. It'll be 32 next year, 34 the year after, 37 the year after that, and then a 32-year-old Blake Griffin has a player option, which, guys, no disrespect now. Let's be adults. He's going to take it because it'll be his last big payday at 32, $39 million. The Clippers couldn't win with a trio of Chris Paul, DeAndre Jordan, and Blake Griffin. And a supporting cast. They couldn't get it done. They couldn't win anything. So pardon me on the day we acquire Blake Griffin here. What makes you think that a trio of Reggie Jackson, Blake Griffin with less athleticism, and Andre Drummond is going to somehow be tangibly better? Look, Blake Griffin hasn't had 100 dunks in a season since 2013. If you actually watch the games, all right, and you actually watch the league, you well know Blake is not the same player he once was. Now, he's not devoid of athleticism. He'll still have freaky moments. And to Blake's credit, he has tried to improve his game and modernize his game. Part of that is he's not the player he was. Physically, you just don't match up anymore. Now, can Blake stretch the floor? A little bit. He's still below league average shooting a three. He'll give you about 34% from deep. The duo of Drummond and Griffin, it can work. It worked with DeAndre Jordan and Griffin in L.A. They'll play some two-man game. I think they'll run some wacky pick and roll. There's going to be a problem, though, because here's the issue. Both guys need the ball in their hands. Drummond has facilitated the offense this year. Well, that's what Blake Griffin does. So there's going to have to be a compromise there. I like the fact that Blake Griffin, depending on how many minutes you can get out of him and how healthy he could stay, you can play him at the center position in a small ball lineup. The problem from what I see is, A, Blake Griffin's not a superstar. B, he's not the player he once was, and he will only get worse from here. And C, you have now just given up any salary flexibility you had left, any depth that you had left, and you gave up 2 draft picks. So let me set the scene for where you're at, and I'll throw the number out, 248-539-9797. I got a million thoughts, but I want to just break the trade itself down before I go into Van Gundy and Goris and the rest. Here's where you're at. You're about $3.5 million under the luxury tax threshold. So you're done. This is your roster. You have no first-round pick this year, so you're not going to be able to add anybody to this roster that matters, okay? Drummond and Griffin are going to take up more money as each year goes along. Now, you've created an opportunity for Luke Kennard. I'm fine with that. The problem I had with Kennard on draft night is the problem I have today. I think he's a dead-eye shooter, a rotational player, but he is so morbidly compromised defensively, I don't believe he can be a 30 to 35-minute-a-night two-guard in this league. You will now have a backcourt of Ish Smith and Luke Kennard that will be amongst the 5 worst defensive backcourts in basketball. You will have 2 big men who have a similar skill set regarding being a point forward. You have no way to get better. You got no draft pick and no depth. I mean, you just don't have depth. Ish Smith is a below-average backup point guard. I have no use for him. Anthony Tolliver becomes one of your mainstays off the bench. Langston Galloway. I think the big you got from L.A., whose name escapes me, not Bryce Johnson, the other one, he actually replaces Eric Moreland because he is a rebounder. But your bench is awful. Your starting 5 is still well below what's necessary to be a contending team. And as exciting as it is to get a player you recognize in town, you have no way of getting better. That's where I think this deal treads on the line of irresponsibility. This is where a real owner, an owner that I think is clued in, an owner that knows basketball, doesn't allow this. Because basically, you've allowed Stan Van Gundy, who's got 1.5 years left on his contract, to make a move that's going to dictate the next 4 to 5 years of your franchise. And if and when Stan is fired, you will now have to hire someone who has to navigate a roster that has $70 million tied up in 2 guys that nobody wants. That is a very dangerous game to play. Can it work is the question. Define working. Can you make the playoffs? Yes. Can you win a playoff series? Maybe. But that's it. That's the end. And while that might be good enough in year 1, no one will be happy with that 2-3 years down the line. Last thing before we got to keep it timely, and I'll throw the number out, 248-539-9797. Again, if you're excited, that's your business. You're fine. I'm not mad at anybody. I get it. You want something to watch. I think it's incredibly irresponsible what they're doing here. You want to make a move to try to fill the seats at the cost of ever building something legitimate here? No, I'm not going to be partisan to that. The other angle is Blake Griffin. This is a guy who didn't just play in L.A., he loved L.A. He lived the L.A. lifestyle. The commercials, the celebrity girlfriends, being out there. You wake up and find out that you've been traded to 25 degrees and snow, and not a destination market in this league. Probably one of the 7 or 8 worst free agent markets in the league. If I'm Blake Griffin, I'm not happy. The Clippers ran a game on me. I'm not happy to be here. He could say whatever he wants about being ready for the next chapter. He has to say that. I think it's interesting to see how Blake handles this if they don't win anything, if they don't progress, if they don't get better players around him. Because then you're going to be dealing with an overpaid, underperforming, unhappy player who, even if he demands a trade, will be untradeable because he's on the wrong side of 30 and makes way too much money.